My name is Liora Kane, and I turned 32 the day a box showed up at my door, wrapped in industrial tape, no card, no return address, just my name in crooked, angry letters. But what truly chilled me was the way my husband's face changed the second he saw it. He didn't smile, he didn't move, and in that moment, I wasn't sure what unsettled me more, or the way he looked at me like I'd been marked. What they didn't know was that package didn't just contain a gift. It carried the first crack in a very old lie. Tell me something. What would you do if the people who once held your hand were now sending things you couldn't even hold? A familiar chime. But what waited outside would unravel everything I thought I knew. It had been a slow morning. I'd been sketching logos for a local cafe, fingers stained with graphite, a mug of chamomile cooling beside me. The living room was warm, scented with the citrus candle Darren liked to light when I worked. A small birthday gift to myself, this quiet. No drama, no chaos, just stillness. I set my pencil down, stretched out the ache in my wrist, and walked barefoot across the rug to the front door. There it was, a box, brown, dense, and sealed within an inch of its life. At first I smiled. Maybe Darren had ordered something special, or my mom had finally forgiven me for skipping last Thanksgiving and sent one of her famous tea sets. It was heavy, not like books heavy, more like something dense, solid, wrong. There was no note, no branding, just a printed label with my full name in all caps, and under sender it only read, "My stomach dropped, Verna." Only she used that old P.O. box. That woman could turn a welcome mat into a trapdoor. "Hey!" Darren's voice came from behind me, closer than I expected. "Didn't we say no surprises today?" I looked over my shoulder. He was halfway down the stairs, still in his flannel pajama pants, eyes locked on the box in my hands. "Who's it from?" he asked, voice tight. "No idea," I replied, shifting it onto the entryway bench. No return address, just a P.O. box. I didn't need to say more. He knew. He always knew. "Don't open it." He walked over, kneeling beside me to examine the seal. "I'm serious, Liora." I blinked. "You think it's dangerous?" "I think anything from Verna that shows up today of all days without warning deserves caution." "She probably thinks this is some grand gesture," I muttered. But the smarter part of me, the one that remembered how she left my dad's funeral early to close a business deal, the one who caught her forging our family crest onto fake antiques, knew better. "Something's off," Darren said, standing again. "The weight, the tape, that label, it's not just a package, it's a message." I glanced back at him, brows furrowed. "What kind of message?" He didn't answer right away. "We should call someone," he said quietly. "This might not be safe." "Call who?" I asked. "The police? Over a box?" He didn't reply, just looked at me. His eyes weren't angry. They were worried. Not about himself, about me, about what might be inside. And suddenly, I wasn't so sure anymore. Not about the package, not about my aunt, not even about what today was supposed to mean. I turned back toward the box. The hallway around us felt colder now, the air heavier. The walls of our home, once warm and safe, suddenly echoed a little too much. That quiet, almost inaudible voice inside me that used to whisper things I didn't want to hear. Verna never sends something without a reason. This wasn't a birthday gift. It was a warning, a test, or maybe the beginning of something far, far worse. Darren stood across the room like the box had grown fangs. His shoulders squared, one hand gripping his phone, the other hovering at his side like he didn't know whether to grab me or the package first. "I'm serious," he said. "We shouldn't open it." I didn't answer. My fingers hovered near the taped edge of the box, the skin on my knuckles pale and bloodless. It was still there on the entry bench, unmoving, but it felt alive, like it was watching us. "No card," Darren murmured. He stepped closer, squinting at the label. "No return address, just this," he pointed. "The P.O. Box 3119. I didn't need him to finish the sentence. I already knew what it meant. So did he. Verna. He crouched next to the box, fingertips grazing the corner. "This isn't her usual style. You remember last time? The wine basket with the fake note from Uncle Mitch?" I gave a weak smile. "You mean the basket that had 3 expired jars of caviar and a photo of her holding up a check?" He nodded once, then leaned in. But this is different. I noticed then that he hadn't touched the box. Not really. He kept his hands near it, circling like it might bite. She's always been manipulative, I said, softer now. But this feels like something else. Look at this, he whispered, pointing to the lower left edge. I leaned in. The tape there had been applied twice, sloppily, the kind of redundancy you don't do unless you're trying to cover something. What if there's something inside? He said. I crossed my arms over my chest, trying to still the chill spreading across my skin. Like what? He didn't answer, but the word neither of us wanted to say was already floating between us. Evidence, or worse. I think we should call someone, Darren said finally. Like who? I asked, even though I already knew what he meant. He raised his phone halfway. Non-emergency line. We don't have to make a big deal of it. But that was the thing. Verna never did small deals. Me, 10 years old, clutching a broken porcelain figurine. Verna standing above me with that silky voice saying, "If you want to protect your dad's legacy, little one, you'll say it was your idea to move it, not Mara's." I'd nodded. Of course I had. She made it sound like a gift, like I was being chosen. But now, standing in my hallway all these years later, I realized that wasn't a gift. It was grooming. And this box? This was the next test. I don't want the cops involved yet, I said slowly. Not until we know what it is. Darren lowered the phone, his jaw tight. Liora, she'll know, I continued. If we involve the police, she'll know we're scared, and that's how she wins. He looked at me for a long moment, eyes searching mine like they were reading more than I said aloud. Then he asked, "Do you still trust her?" That question hit me harder than I expected. I didn't answer. There were layers to Verna, but right now all I could see was that box. "She wouldn't hurt me," I said finally, the words brittle even to my own ears. "Not directly." Darren raised an eyebrow. "What about indirectly?" I hated that he was right. I glanced down again. The package was sweating, not literally, but it might as well have been. The heat of tension radiating off it made the whole entryway feel claustrophobic. "I just want today to be normal," I whispered. "One birthday, just one, without her shadow creeping in." He softened. For a second, the storm in his expression faded, replaced by something gentler. He stepped closer, resting his hand lightly on my back. "I know," he said. "But that's exactly why we shouldn't let her hijack this." I nodded, but didn't move. Something about the box was pulling at me, like it had fingers. What was in there? Something stolen? Something planted? Or something meant to make me choose? My fingers twitched at my side. Darren must have seen it. "Don't," he warned, his voice firmer now. "Liora, I mean it." I turned to him. "I'm not opening it, not yet." "Then what are you doing?" I walked to the hallway closet and grabbed a pair of gloves. "I'm going to inspect it, carefully. No touching anything inside, just surface." Darren didn't stop me, but he didn't help either. He stood by the stairwell, arms crossed, watching like I was defusing a bomb. I crouched beside the box again, pulling on the gloves. The material squeaked slightly as I flexed my fingers. Slowly, I traced the top edge. The cardboard was thick, new, but the tape had flecks of something on it, not dust. Ash? I leaned closer, and then I saw it. Beneath the top layer of tape, pressed into the box like a faint brand, was something red, a symbol, wax, pressed with some kind of emblem I didn't recognize. "What the hell?" I whispered. Darren stepped closer again. "What is that?" I didn't answer right away. My mind was racing. Verna used to collect wax seals, old ones, family crests, business insignias. Once even a royal mark she claimed came from Prussia. This one looked different, newer, but intentional. "She used a seal," I murmured, "like a signature." Darren crouched beside me, eyes narrowing. "She wanted us to see that." I nodded, swallowing hard. "She's sending a message," I said, "and I don't think it's just for me." For a long beat, we both stared, at the box, at each other, at everything we suddenly didn't know. And that was the moment I realized. Verna hadn't just sent a package. She'd declared a move. And now it was our turn to respond. I didn't sleep. Even after we moved the box to the corner of the room, even after Darren double-checked the locks and dimmed the lights, the image of that wax seal kept pressing against my eyelids like an unwanted memory. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint pulse of the street lamp outside flickering through the blinds like a heartbeat. My chest felt tight, not like fear. Something older than that, something buried. When I finally closed my eyes, it wasn't the present that greeted me. It was her voice. "You're special, Liora, not like the others." I was 10. I remember the crack, the soft, sick sound of porcelain shattering behind me. Mara's hand was still raised. We didn't speak. We just stood there, the silence so loud it made my ears ring. Then came Verna. She swept in, elegant as always in her linen wrap and gold bracelets. The second she saw the mess, her gaze locked on me. But then I saw Mara. She shook her head almost imperceptibly. "Please." That's what her eyes said. "Please." And before I even knew what I was doing, I said it. I dropped it. Verna's expression didn't change, not at first, but a moment later, something softened. She smiled. Not kind, not cruel, just knowing. She crouched beside me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're loyal," she said, brushing a curl behind my ear. "That's rare, darling. Loyalty means power." I didn't understand what she meant then. I thought I was protecting Mara. That wasn't love. That was training. When I woke, it was still dark. Darren's side of the bed was empty. I found him in the kitchen, barefoot, staring out the window. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat beside him, steam long gone. He didn't turn when I walked in. "You dreaming about her too?" I didn't answer, just grabbed a mug and poured myself some of the lukewarm brew. It tasted like burnt hopes and yesterday's dread. "She knew what she was doing," he said, "sending it on your birthday." "I know. It's a trigger, a way in." "I know," I repeated, softer now. He finally looked at me. "So what are we going to do?" I swallowed. My throat was dry. "I need to think." And I did. She never asked for anything in return. Not then, but now? Now the debt was knocking. And it had a wax seal. By late morning, I still hadn't touched the box, but I couldn't stop circling it, like some kind of prey animal sniffing out a trap. Was it all calculated? Did she ever care about me? That was Verna's brilliance. Her weapon of choice wasn't venom. It was confusion. She didn't hurt you outright. She made you wonder if maybe you were overreacting, if maybe she was doing you a favor, if maybe you owed her. And as I stared at the box, one question returned like a slow drip in the back of my brain. Why now? Why this year? Why me? And then I heard it. The creak of the mailbox. I jumped up, crossed the room in 3 quick strides, and pulled open the door. Inside was a single envelope. But this wasn't Verna's handwriting. This was shakier, slanted, rushed. I brought it inside, hands trembling slightly, and sat down at the kitchen table, tore it open. Inside, one sentence, printed in black ink. No signature, no explanation, just that. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Don't let her in again." Again? I read it twice, 3 times, and suddenly something clicked. That scholarship she helped me get? She'd told me it was from a private donor. What if it wasn't? The walls felt like they were closing in. Every kindness now looked like a hook, every hug a tether. My head was spinning. And somewhere, deep inside, something cracked. I stood, walked slowly toward the box, sat back on the bench. I pressed a gloved hand to its surface, feeling the slight bump of the emblem underneath, and I whispered, "What do you want from me now?" The box, of course, didn't answer, but the question no longer felt rhetorical, because for the first time, I wasn't sure if Verna wanted me scared or obedient. She was hoping I'd open it myself. I waited until Darren left for work, so I waited until the house fell into stillness again. The box sat where I'd left it, on the bench by the wall, framed by morning light cutting sharp lines across the floor. Dust floated in the air like snow suspended in time. I took a breath, then another, slid on gloves, and gently, slowly, began peeling back the tape. It was like undressing a corpse, careful, respectful, knowing too much pressure in the wrong place could break something you'd never get back. Under the second layer of tape, something caught the light, a shimmer. I paused, bent closer. It wasn't just a blob of red, not a family crest, not Verna's old business insignia either. Something else. Something intentional. Teeth? I jerked my hand back. What the hell was this? I opened the rest of the box, carefully parting the cardboard flaps. Inside, black tissue paper, thick, expensive, the kind that crinkled like old silk. I didn't unwrap it yet. Instead, I focused on what was underneath, because at the very bottom of the box, barely visible beneath the last fold of paper, was a thin, rectangular tag, gray, laminated, and stamped across it, Tanzig Shipping, INTL. Tanzig? I stood, crossed the room, and pulled out my laptop. My fingers flew across the keys. Tanzig Shipping, Portland-based, specializes in international freight for boutique exporters, primarily art, antiques, cultural assets. My stomach twisted. That's Verna's world. Imports, exports, obscure galleries, and just enough red tape to blur the line between legal and shady. I clicked into the shipment records, half expecting to find nothing. But there it was. One shipment from Austria. Arrived 2 weeks ago. Destination, Verna's Gallery. Weight, 4.7 lbs. Item description, private materials archival. Private archival. That could mean anything. Or nothing. But what chilled me was the timing. 2 weeks ago, Verna had called me out of nowhere, just to check in. Had she already been planning this? Was the package even meant for me? Or was I just the safest drop point? I went back to the box, unwrapped the small bundle of tissue. Inside was a wooden object, smooth, oval, palm-sized. Maybe a paperweight? A carved piece of driftwood, sanded down to a dull sheen. A real one, old, worn, stamped with numbers I didn't recognize, and just beneath the resin, a tiny scroll, encased, impossible to reach without breaking the seal. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. The back of my neck tingled. I didn't recognize the key, but something about it felt personal, like it wasn't just for a lock, it was for a secret. I set the object down and sat back, breath coming short. The house felt smaller now, the silence pressing in. I texted Darren, "Found something. We need to talk tonight." I didn't include details. I didn't want to say too much over text, but I couldn't sit still either. So I took the key object and the laminated tag, snapped a photo, and sent it to someone who might know better. Recognize this? No context yet. Just need a gut check. Minutes ticked by. I paced, watched the shadows move along the floor, and a reply. That wax seal? It's not just decorative, it's registered. Belongs to a blacklisted dealer in Eastern Europe. I stared at the message, my pulse thudding. Blacklisted? Verna wasn't just flirting with shady business. She was dragging me into something criminal. And I didn't think it was by accident, which meant she'd either gotten reckless or desperate, and I wasn't sure which scared me more. I reread the message again, my fingers tightening around the phone. Then the doorbell rang. I froze. Looked at the time. It was too early for Darren, too late for deliveries. I walked slowly to the window and peeked through the curtain. No car, no movement, just a small white envelope sitting on the welcome mat. I opened the door with shaking hands, picked it up. Inside was a folded note, typewritten. "The key is not for opening, it's for remembering." No signature, no instructions, just that. I stood there for a long moment, wind brushing past my ankles, the scent of rain in the air, and for the first time I realized something terrifying. This was bigger, stranger, older, and if that key was for remembering what? The phone rang just after noon. No caller ID, but I didn't need one. Only one person would have the audacity to call after sending a package like that, and before I had time to make sense of it. I let it ring once, twice, then I picked up. That voice, silky, sugar-sweet, a blade wrapped in velvet. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd gotten it," she added. "You're usually quicker." I stared out the kitchen window, watching raindrops trail down the glass like nervous fingers. "It came," I said flatly. "And? What exactly did you send me?" "Oh, don't be dramatic. It's just a little piece of the past. A keepsake." I turned from the window and pressed my thumb to my temple. The ache behind my eyes had bloomed into something sharp and persistent. "Cut the act, Verna. I found the seal. I found the Tanzig tag. This isn't some birthday memento." Silence. A long, calculated pause. Then, "You've always been a clever girl." "What's the key for?" I asked. Another pause. "You tell me," she said softly. "After all, it was your mother's." The room felt colder suddenly. "Oh, sweetheart," she interrupted. "There's so much you don't know." Instead, I gripped it tighter. But she wasn't fazed. If anything, she sounded amused. "You always thought she was the saint and I was the sinner," she said. "That's fine. It's easier that way, isn't it? But your mother had secrets." I swallowed hard. She let the silence linger before adding, "And some of those secrets belong to you." A creak in the hallway made me turn my head sharply. Nothing. But my whole body was humming now, like I'd been plugged into something electric. "What are you trying to do?" I asked. "Just delivering what was promised. The rest is up to you." Then she hung up. Just like that. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing. I set the phone down gently, and then I grabbed the key again, turned it over in my palm. My mother's? I tried to remember if I'd ever seen her with anything like it. But the memories were hazy. She died when I was 15. Most of what I remembered was filtered through hospital rooms and muted holidays. One summer, the last one, she'd taken me to a cabin upstate, just the two of us. A break from the city, from Verna. I remember her locking something in a drawer, small, wooden. She'd said it was just some letters. I never asked again. My chest tightened. Was that what this key opened? I grabbed my phone again and texted Darren. "I need to find something. Can we talk tonight?" He responded almost instantly. "I'll be home by 6. Want me to bring dinner?" "Yes. Ty, you okay?" I stared at the blinking cursor. "I'm not sure." I left it at that. The afternoon dragged. The key is not for opening, it's for remembering. What did that mean? Remembering what? By the time Darren walked in, the sky had turned a moody gray, and the scent of rain clung to the doorway like an omen. He placed the takeout on the table, kicked off his shoes, and gave me a long look. "You've got that face," he said. "What face?" "The Verna just lit a match and walked away face." I tried to smile. Failed. "She called." His brows lifted. "She what?" I nodded. "Said the key belonged to my mom." He blinked. "Your mom?" "Apparently," I said. "And she claims there were secrets, from her, about me." He exhaled slowly and sat down beside me. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I don't know my own family." He placed a hand on mine. "We'll figure this out." I wanted to believe that. But I also knew what Verna was capable of. We ate dinner mostly in silence, the clink of chopsticks against takeout containers the only sound. But the listing date? Updated 2 weeks ago. My pulse spiked. I checked the address again. Last visit logged, Liora Kane. She'd been there, recently. Maybe even before the package came. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. Was that where the key fit? The rain outside thickened, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. I closed the laptop, because now I wasn't just chasing memories, I was chasing ghosts, and they were starting to leave footprints. The text came just after midnight. "Don't open it, Liora. I didn't want this." No punctuation, no emoji, just flat panic, bleeding through the screen. I stared at the message, heart thudding, thumb hovering over the reply button. I hadn't heard from Mara in over a year, not since the last family gathering where she refused to meet my eyes and left early, muttering something about a headache. "Now this?" I typed back. "What do you mean? What's in the box?" The 3 dots blinked, then disappeared, then blinked again. "I'm sorry, I had to help her. She said I owed her, but I didn't know what was really in it." I didn't blink, just stared at the words until my vision blurred. I called her, straight to voicemail. I texted again. "You helped her?" "What do you mean?" No response. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, phone beside me, untouched toast on the plate, coffee gone cold. Darren was upstairs on a work call, his voice muffled behind the closed office door. Outside, the Portland sky hung low and heavy, a dull curtain of gray. And then, without warning, my phone buzzed. A call. Mara. I answered on the first ring. "Mara?" She didn't say hello. "I'm sorry, Liora. I didn't know she was going to drag you into this." Her voice was shaking. Not the tight, calculated kind. The kind that slips through when you've held it in too long. "Talk to me," I said quietly. "What's going on?" She told me to pack the box, Mara said. Said it was just memorabilia. Family stuff. She made it sound harmless, but then she handed me gloves. Gloves, Liora. And this tight script of what to write on the label, and she watched me the whole time. I clenched the phone tighter. She said it was for legacy preservation, Mara continued. Said it was something your mom would have wanted you to have. But she was smiling, Liora. That smile she gets when she's setting someone up. I felt the air in my chest shrink. Why didn't you tell me? Her words landed heavy. I knew that feeling. The invisible leash Verna kept wrapped around people's throats, tugging when you tried to run, smiling when you stayed. Mara, I said, do you know what's actually in the package? A pause. No, she whispered, but I know the key wasn't part of it. That was added later, after she called that man from Hungary. She thought I wasn't listening, but I heard her. She said the resin would hold until customs cleared it. I nearly dropped the phone. What man? She called him Gabor. Said he'd handled shipments like this before. Said you wouldn't know what the key meant yet, but eventually you would. And then what? I sat down hard. My mind was spinning. She used my mother to bait me, I murmured. Mara's breath hitched on the other end. She's unraveling, Liora. I think she's scared. The gallery's under audit. She's been shredding papers like crazy. That explained the urgency. The sealed key. The international shipping. Mara, I said, voice low, listen to me. You're not safe. I know, she whispered. She won't, Mara cut in, because I'm disappearing for a few days. Where? I can't say. Nothing's going to happen, she said, calmer now. I've saved a backup, just in case. A backup of what? But she didn't answer. I have to go, she whispered. She's calling. But the line went dead. I stood in the middle of my living room, phone still pressed to my ear, the silence ringing louder than the call. She knew something big, and Verna was close enough to catch the scent. The floor creaked upstairs. Darren came down a few minutes later, still barefoot, eyes sleepy. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Mara called. His brows rose. And? She helped Verna with the package, but she didn't know what it really was. She's sure? She sounded terrified. Darren ran a hand through his hair. So we've got an accomplice, a black market shipping tag, and now a Hungarian connection? Apparently, I said. He stared at me, then exhaled. We need to go to the police. Not yet. Liora. She's not done playing, I said. And I want to know why. The words hung in the air between us. A minute later, Darren nodded. Then we do it smart. We document everything. We play by the book. But we don't let her get ahead again. I looked back toward the bench. The key was still there, gleaming faintly in the light. And I remembered what Mara said. I didn't know what Verna's endgame was. And the next move? It was mine. I couldn't sleep. Not after what Mara said. Not after the silence that followed. The house creaked around me, stretching and settling into night. But I stayed in the living room, lights low, wrapped in Darren's oversized sweatshirt and a blanket I didn't remember pulling over my lap. On the coffee table sat the key, still glinting in that haunting way, still waiting. Mara had said it wasn't about my mother, that Verna wanted me to believe that. But why? Why bring my mother into it at all? It had been hers, my mom's. Near the back, tucked between 2 pages, a letter. The envelope was brittle with age, yellowing. The paper had absorbed the scent of lavender and cedar, like it had been hidden somewhere intimate. My name was scrawled across the front in my mother's hand, not Liora, not sweetheart, just my full name, like it was a document. I sat down and peeled it open, hands trembling. Inside, the ink had faded but remained legible. If you're reading this, it means Verna found a way to bring you into it. My heart stopped. I read each word like it was a heartbeat. I pressed a hand to my chest, steadying the thrum of panic. I threatened to go to the police. She threatened to ruin me, said no one would believe the weaker sister, and she was right. But she never changes. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I hid one piece, one original pattern, the only one they never got. If she ever finds it, she'll try to claim it's hers. Don't let her. The key is to the drawer. You know the one. I lowered the letter slowly, my hands shaking, The drawer, the cabin, the last trip we ever took together. She had locked it, told me not to snoop, said it was just some old letters. But it wasn't. It was a map. Darren came downstairs just then, rubbing his eyes. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. I handed him the letter. He read in silence. When he finished, he sat beside me on the couch. "So, Verna's after the pattern. That's what this is about?" "Maybe," I said. "But I think it's more than that." I gestured to the letter. "This isn't just about money. This is about erasing my mother, claiming what was hers, turning me into a pawn to do it." Darren exhaled. "So what now?" I looked at the key again. "I go back." He stiffened. "To the cabin?" Darren rubbed the back of his neck. "You're sure it's safe?" I shook my head. "Not even a little." We sat there in silence, the hum of the fridge the only sound between us. Finally, he stood and grabbed his keys from the counter. "Then we go together." I looked up. "Now?" "If we wait, she'll get there first." The road was empty, the kind of late-night quiet that presses in around you like fog. Trees blurred past the windshield, branches reaching out like arms. The GPS led us off the main highway, onto a stretch of gravel and pine. I remembered this road, the turns, the curve near the old barn, the pine needles that used to crunch under our bikes. We stepped out of the car in silence. Crickets chirped, leaves rustled, but something felt off. Darren unlocked the front door. It groaned open. I walked straight to the bedroom. The dresser sat against the far wall, bottom drawer. I pulled it, locked. I pulled the key from my pocket, slid it in, click. The drawer opened. Darren leaned over my shoulder. "You recognize it?" I nodded. "My mother's original patterns. They're hers, all of them." "And the drive?" "I don't know." We stared at it. Neither of us moved. I froze. Darren grabbed my wrist. We weren't alone. The sound of tires grinding over gravel shouldn't be terrifying, but out here, in the middle of the woods, in the dead of night, it was. He looked at me and I nodded once. The porch light flickered, then footsteps, slow, measured, and unmistakably familiar. A knock, sharp, deliberate. She didn't even pretend. "Liora!" came the voice through the wood. Calm, pleasant, as if we were old friends and this was a social visit. "Darling, I know you're in there." My body went cold. How did she find us? How long had she been following? I stood, the flash drive clutched tight in one hand, my mother's sketch pad in the other. Darren stood between me and the door, every muscle in his back drawn tight like a bowstring. Another knock. "Liora, we need to talk, now." I stepped forward. Darren grabbed my wrist. "Don't." "I'm not letting her in," I whispered, "but I'm not hiding either." And there she was, Liora Kane, draped in a trench coat too expensive for this weather, hair perfectly pinned, lipstick flawless. She looked like she belonged in a gallery opening, not standing in the woods at midnight. Her eyes flicked to mine, then past me, to the shadows inside. "You found it," she said softly. "Didn't you?" I didn't answer. "May I come in?" "No," I said. A pause. Her eyes shifted, scanned the darkness over my shoulder like she could already see what I'd found, like she already knew. "You've always had her curiosity," she murmured, "but none of her restraint." "You're trespassing," I said, fingers tightening around the edge of the door. "And you're holding evidence you don't understand." She said it like a warning, or a promise. Behind me, Darren stepped into view. Verna's smile faltered. "Ah," she said, "the protector." He didn't speak, just stood there, solid, watching. She turned her eyes back to me. "I came to offer context, before you go running to someone who might not be as understanding." "Try me," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Your mother's patterns," she said. "They were based on work far older than her, work she didn't fully own. But she kept that sketchpad as if she'd invented it all." I shook my head. "That's not true." "She was brilliant," Verna said, "but naive, and I protected her, the same way I tried to protect you." My voice broke. "You used me." Verna's gaze sharpened. "I gave you opportunities, access, a foundation. That trust fund? That gallery internship? You think any of that was accidental?" "No," I said. I think it was strategic. She tilted her head, appraising me like an art piece she wasn't sure she wanted anymore. Then why didn't you destroy the package? Because I'm not like you. A beat passed. No wind, no sound, just that truth hanging between us. Like Mara? I asked. For the first time, her expression cracked, just for a flicker. You spoke to her. Didn't have to, I lied. She left enough behind. Verna's jaw tightened. She's unstable, she said. She'll say anything to absolve herself. I think she's finally telling the truth, I said. You've always mistaken loyalty for virtue, Liora, but sometimes loyalty is just cowardice dressed in lace. I slammed the door. The chain rattled violently. Then silence. No footsteps retreating, just stillness. I turned to Darren. He locked the door again, deadbolt and chain, then stepped back and whispered, She's not going away. I nodded, throat tight. I know. He looked at the flash drive in my hand. Do we open it? I have to, I said. We plugged it into Darren's laptop, the screen casting a cold blue glow across the room. For a second, nothing happened. Then a folder opened. Inside, documents, contracts, wire transfers, scanned artwork, and a spreadsheet titled Legacy Deal, Kane Archive Transfer. My mouth went dry. There it was. Proof of theft. Buyers I didn't recognize. And a final line in the contract. Transfer of authorship rights upon recipient's death. I blinked. She planned for my mom to die. No, Darren said quietly. She planned for what came after. I sat back, shaking, my whole body buzzing. And then a message appeared on the screen. A pop-up. Liora Kane has requested remote access. I stared at it and watched in real time as the screen blinked again. She was watching. She knew. She was already inside. I slammed the laptop shut. Too late. Verna was in, or trying to be, and that meant she wasn't finished. Darren yanked the plug from the outlet, killing power to the machine. The sudden darkness made the hum of the cabin's silence feel louder than thunder. She was watching us, I whispered. She knows we saw everything. Darren didn't speak. He stood still, jaw tight, fists clenched, as if he was debating whether to crush the laptop or call someone. Maybe both. We couldn't stay here. We had evidence. And now we had a digital footprint leading straight back to her. We need to report this, I said, my voice shaky but firm, before she makes us disappear too. He nodded once. By the time we reached the Portland city limits the next morning, I felt like I had aged a year. Every bump in the road sent a jolt up my spine. Every car that changed lanes felt like a tale. We went straight to the police station. I expected skepticism, maybe even laughter. That's when I knew we were in deeper than I thought. We sat in a small windowless room that smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. Darren rested a hand over mine under the table. I didn't pull away. A woman entered, late 40s, crisp blazer, quiet confidence. She introduced herself as Special Agent Vasquez. Ms. Kane, she said, slipping a flash drive into her own laptop. Can you confirm the source of this? I received it from my aunt. Inside a package she mailed to me. I believe it was meant to intimidate me into silence. She nodded, clicking through files. What she may have done, Vasquez said, is gift wrap her own indictment. That should have felt like a win, but all I felt was dread. Is Mara safe? I asked. Vasquez paused. We've been in contact. She's under temporary protection. So she had gone to them. A sharp relief cut through my chest. I have reason to believe my aunt may flee the country, I said. I hesitated. There's more, I said quietly. Sketches, originals, my mother's. Verna was trying to sell them under her name. Vasquez straightened. Can you produce those? I locked them in my safe, at home. She closed the laptop. Then we'll need to collect them, now. We left the station under escort. 2 cruisers pulled into our driveway behind us, blue lights flashing silently. I unlocked the front door with trembling fingers. Everything looked normal, too normal. The living room still scattered with books and yesterday's coffee mug. The smell of citrus cleaner from the day before. The soft tick of the hallway clock. But I felt it immediately. Something was wrong. I stepped into the hallway. The air felt cooler, and my office door was cracked open. He pushed it fully open. Files were scattered on the floor. The small safe I'd kept tucked inside the bottom cabinet? Gone. My knees buckled. She's been here. A uniformed officer behind us spoke into his radio. We've got signs of forced entry. Front door looks untouched. Must have been the side. Vasquez crouched next to the desk. She didn't want to take everything, just what mattered. I stood frozen, hands at my sides, trying to make sense of it. She'd come into my home. She'd stolen the last piece of my mother that hadn't been tainted, and she'd done it while I was trying to hand her over to justice. She won't, I cut in. She looked surprised. She's not going to run. She's going to burn it all down before she lets anyone else take credit. It came out of me like prophecy. Darren turned to me. Then we hit back first. He opened his backpack and pulled out the spare copy. I blinked. You duplicated it? Last night, he said, before we shut it down. Emotion cracked through my chest like lightning. We handed the drive to Vasquez. But before she left, she turned to me. She's smart, but you've outmaneuvered her. I shook my head. Not yet. That night, we didn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because we knew the next step wasn't hers. It was mine, and I wasn't waiting anymore. At 3:07 a.m., my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Silence. You think this is over, Liora? Her voice, calm, measured, deadly. I never said it was, I replied. A pause. Good. Then let's finish it properly. Click. She called at 3:07 a.m., no threats, no apologies, just a sentence that made my skin go cold. Then let's finish it properly. And just like that, she was gone again. But the echo stayed. Legacy ends with her. She meant my mother, I said. Vasquez didn't look up from the screen. She meant both of you. We filed a formal complaint. Fraud, identity theft, possession of stolen property. And then something shifted. One of the agents returned from a call and leaned in close to Vasquez. She's trying to leave. My stomach dropped. Where? PDX, he said. Private gate, charter flight, destination marked as Geneva. Darren and I locked eyes, of course. She was trying to disappear behind another name, another passport, just like she had before. I want to come, I said. Vasquez looked at me carefully. This isn't a movie, Ms. Kane. No, I said. It's a reckoning. 2 hours later, we were parked in a black SUV across from the private terminal. The sky above was gray and bruised, the early morning clouds pressed low and heavy. Verna, unbothered, composed. Her heels clacked against the pavement like she had nothing to fear. An assistant trailed her, rolling 2 carry-ons. She wore dark sunglasses, even though the sun hadn't broken the horizon. She's still got the originals, I said. They're probably in those bags. She also has no idea she's walking into a trap, Vasquez replied. But she wasn't entirely right, and smiled. The officers moved in fast. She didn't run, didn't fight. She raised her hands with the grace of a ballet dancer and said, You'll want to check the lining of the red case. Inside, my mother's sketches, the real ones, the proof. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt hollow, like winning a chess match you never wanted to play. At the station, she was read her rights. She didn't flinch until I walked into the interview room. They let me. I don't know why I asked, or why Vasquez said yes, but I needed to see her, one last time. She sat calmly, fingers folded, hair still neat, no cuffs, just silence. I pulled out the printed copy of the forged agreement and dropped it on the table between us. Verna looked up slowly, and then she laughed. Not a bitter laugh, a soft, almost admiring one. I underestimated you, she said. I thought you'd fold, like your mother. I leaned in, my voice low. She didn't fold, she sacrificed, and you're the one who taught me what happens when someone finally decides not to. Verna tilted her head. They win? No, I said. They take everything back. And then I left. I don't remember the walk out of the station. I just remember the air outside, cooler, clearer. We drove home in silence. Darren reached across the console and held my hand the whole way. At home, I pulled the originals out of the evidence return folder and laid them on the dining table. I stared at every brushstroke, every faded note in the margins, the heart of my mother's work. And I made a decision. She's not getting the last word, I told Darren. He nodded. Then what's next? I smiled for the first time in days. We published them, properly, with her name. He leaned down, kissed the top of my head. She'd be proud. I stared out the window. But in my chest, something still didn't sit right. Because for all the chaos Verna left behind, there was one thing she hadn't explained. One shipment in the Tanzig records with no listed contents, no recipient, just a signature, and a single line of text. Release upon Liora's return. My heart dropped. Return where? And return to what? I didn't speak for almost a day, but somehow none of that made me feel better. I sat in the kitchen with a warm mug between my hands, steam curling into the quiet like ghost thoughts I wasn't ready to name. Across the table, Darren flipped through paperwork from the police, return receipts, chain of custody forms, updates from Agent Vasquez. I hadn't touched them, not yet. Release upon Liora's return. Return. Where? To what? The idea haunted me more than anything else. I'd gone back to the cabin, reclaimed my mother's work, pulled Verna into the light. I stood and wandered into the hallway, into the small guest room where I kept what little remained of my mother's personal things, a drawer of her scarves, a jewelry box with only one earring left, a notebook filled with unfinished thoughts. I picked it up again, flipped it over, in my mother's handwriting. The house on Raynor Street, July before we left. Left? I never remembered us living there. I took the photo back to the kitchen. He leaned forward. What do you mean? I showed him the photo, his brow furrowed. That's not your childhood home. I know. I think it came before. You think this is where Verna sent the final shipment? Or where she wanted me to go looking? We pulled up county records. There it was, 57 Raynor Street, owned by a shell company, transferred 4 years ago from the Kane Family Trust. It had been empty since. No active utilities, no rental history, a dead house, but it was still standing. Darren insisted on coming with me, but I needed to go alone, not out of pride, out of instinct. Whatever waited there, it wasn't just a package, it was personal. So I left just before dusk, the sky bruised and quiet, the streets unfamiliar but oddly comforting in their stillness. I stepped inside. The air was stale, dust and wood, silence layered on silence. And then I saw it. In the center of the empty living room, a single trunk, dark wood, brass latches, no lock. I approached slowly. My heartbeat was a metronome in my ears. I knelt and opened it. Inside, dozens of letters, all addressed to me, all in my mother's handwriting. She'd written them in advance, for birthdays, for heartbreaks, for milestones she would never see. I pulled the first one free. My vision blurred. I pressed the paper to my chest, and I cried. Not loud, not broken. Just, finally, fully. The kind of crying that empties a well that's been waiting years to dry. I stayed there until the sun began to rise, casting pale gold across the dust-covered floor. And when I finally stood, I felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but steady. A photo, Verna and my mother, smiling, and in the corner, a third person, someone I didn't recognize. A man, dark suit, gray eyes, and behind them, a crate marked with a seal I'd seen only once before, on the first package Verna sent, so the story wasn't over. Not yet. I held the photo like it might burn me. My mother, Verna, and a man I'd never seen. Everything came rushing back like water behind a broken dam, the fake company, the accounts, the years of silence, and my mother's one unfinished painting, the one she titled Inheritance. This wasn't just a battle over art. It had never been. This was about legacy, identity, and the one truth Verna hoped I'd never find. I drove straight from the house on Raynor Street to Agent Vasquez's office. I dropped the photo on her desk. Vasquez's eyes narrowed. "Do you realize what you just handed me?" I nodded. And for the first time, I felt ready, not to fight, but to finish. The final court hearing was set for Friday. Verna was already facing charges for art fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice. But this time, it wasn't just her on trial. It was the truth itself. Darren sat beside me as the judge reviewed the new evidence. Verna's company ownership transfers, the digital bank trails, and finally, the letters. The court fell quiet as I read from the first one aloud. I looked up. The courtroom didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like closure. The judge ruled in our favor. All assets tied to Verna's network were to be liquidated. Verna didn't speak as she was led away. She didn't need to. 2 months later, the gallery reopened, not as it once was, better. We called it the Veil Collection. The other half? I left blank. White walls, empty frames. People walked those halls in reverent silence. Some cried, some lingered. One little girl tugged her mother's sleeve and pointed at the last letter on display. Did her mom write that for her birthday? I smiled. Yes, every year. On the back patio of the gallery, I sipped coffee while the sun dipped behind the skyline. Darren sat beside me, arms folded behind his head. "You think she'd be proud?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled the last unopened letter from my pocket. It had no date, just my name. I broke the seal. "You are not what they called you, not what they took from you. You are the fire I left behind." I folded the letter, wiped my eyes, then looked at Darren. "Yeah," I said, "she'd be proud." So what did I learn from all of this? The silence you choose for yourself, the peace you build from ruins, and the people you become when you're finally free from who they said you were. Thanks for sticking with me. If you've ever faced betrayal, fought for something you almost gave up on, or found strength in a place you didn't expect, you're not alone. Subscribe for more stories like this. Like if this one hit home, comment to share your thoughts and share it with someone who needs a little hope tonight. And if you're ready for another story about secrets, survival, and second chances, watch the next one. It might change everything.